What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So something interesting keeps happening in the FTC Microsoft hearings, and that's that Nintendo keeps coming up. And in a recent hearing, it appears some confusions come out around Nintendo and what kind of capabilities their next generation system would have and what it would be most comparable to, but we'll go over all of that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about Final Fantasy XVI as Square Enix did share some initial sales information for us, and we'll also be going over some updates around Nintendo Switch Online with some games heading into the service and PlayStation Plus. So if you guys enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps that a ton, and if new here to the Spawnwave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. We're going to start today with a listing that was spotted for the Korean ratings board that appears to show Rockstar preparing a highly anticipated remaster, and one that people kind of thought wasn't going to happen, but we can see this posted up by Gamatsu, who did spot this rating, where they say the Game Rating and Administration Committee of Korea published a new rating for Red Dead Redemption on June 15th. In fact, looking a little bit more into it, the classification number, it has the NV designation, which appears to refer to a console game and not necessarily like a PC game. So is it possible that we could be seeing Red Dead Redemption get that coveted remaster? It is backwards compatible right now on the Xbox Series, and as it stands, just through like backwards compatibility with 4K and auto HDR and stuff, it looks really good, but clearly there is more that could be done by Rockstar, maybe even trying to fit it closer to what we see with Red Dead Redemption 2. They had mentioned before, at least we had heard through rumors, that the code for the game was kind of a mess to go back and rework, but there's money to be made, and yeah, I think if they do this remaster, it would sell really well, especially if they get it on like the PS5, the Xbox Series, and PC. Who knows, maybe there's even a Switch version up their sleeve, we'll see. But the fact that we are seeing a rating come out makes me think we're probably gonna hear about this game sooner rather than later. Also, as part of that Nintendo annual gathering of the shareholders, there was some information that was released around how Nintendo plans to combat scalpers whenever they do release their next system, because we saw what happened with the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series. Those prices were triple in some instances online. Well, we can see this posted up. This over on Nintendo Life says the plan going forward with new hardware launches is to simply produce and ship in numbers that can meet customer demand. This is all coming from an answer to a question with Shintaro Furukawa talking to investors. So I guess the plan is to just ship a bunch of systems, which really hasn't worked well in the past for any of these companies. But Furukawa did add that Nintendo then consider whether there are any other possible measures that could take along with an increase in stock. So they could sell through their website, similar to what they do with the Nintendo 64 controllers, where you need your account and it's trackable that way. So I guess people can't stack up 20 of these things and then try to drop them on eBay or wherever else for double the price. But still, it hasn't necessarily worked the best even for those Nintendo 64 controllers. So either way, Nintendo is going to be battling scalpers, I'm sure, for at least the first year whenever their next system drops, just because the demand is going to be super high for it. Oh, and as more and more of these filings are released to the public, we are getting more information around Microsoft and what their plans were over the last couple of years for acquisition targets, and one of them was indeed Square Enix. And they had plans all around how they were going to divvy up some of their games and how they would work to hold up Game Pass with their vast catalog of titles. But there was another interesting note, which you can see here. This was posted up by The Verge, where it said, quote, combining Square Enix's robust mobile native portfolio with our own could potentially help us create a mobile native Xbox Game Pass SKU. This would include ports of classic games sold at a premium. Now, if you think about it, on mobile devices, you can buy a lot of Square Enix games, some of the Final Fantasies, of course, Chrono Trigger's in there, and then who knows, maybe they would work to port over even more titles if there was a mobile-specific version of Game Pass. And I think there's still a future for that with Microsoft, although They also seem to want to try to tie everything together, which is, I think, what they're working on with PC Game Pass as well. Something 5, even 10 years down the line. But who knows? Maybe Microsoft could pop up at some point, especially when they pick up Activision King Blizzard, if they are able to get that to go through. And all of a sudden, they have a Game Pass set up for your mobile phone, your console, and your PC. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with Nintendo appearing during these FTC Microsoft hearings, and it's consistently been coming up, mostly trying to place the Switch in the market. Is it a competitor to the PlayStation and the Xbox? Is it off doing its own thing? Should we recognize how many systems it's sold and the fact that it's done as well as it has software-wise without Call of Duty? Or take that out of the equation and then we'll be able to compare PlayStation and Xbox because they have, of course, the high-end quote-unquote sector on lock. Well, it keeps coming up mostly because both sides want it to be viewed differently, but one thing's for sure, Bobby Kotick had a very interesting bit of information that came out during his own testimony and all of this in a hearing, as he talked about their belief on what Nintendo's next generation device could be, and that then kind of got spun and taken out of context and ended up as their next system, Nintendo's, would be on par, roughly power-wise, with a PlayStation 4 or an Xbox One. But we'll get to that in a minute. First, though, I do want to point out something that was said by Bobby Kotick, and it kind of answers the question that many people have, is why is there no Call of Duty game on what's proven to be a very successful platform? And he discussed really what was a bad call on his part. We can see this posted up by VGC, transcribed during that hearing, saying, "I made a bad judgment," this from Kotick. "When I had seen the prototype of the Switch, it was different than when I saw the prototype of the Wii, and I thought it was the most extraordinary video game system ever created." It is interesting, though, because Activision actually put quite a few Call of Duty games on the Wii. You can technically still play, I think, Black Ops online on the Wii, and yeah, people are still playing it, by the way. I mean, it goes on to say, "When I saw the prototypes for Switch, I was concerned because they were trying to accomplish a lot with a console that also had a portable capability. I didn't think it was going to be widely successful." Goes on once again to say, "It's probably the second most successful video game system of all time, so it was a bad decision on my part." Yeah, I'd agree there, but it's not like it was just Activision who thought that. There were many Japanese developers and publishers that have basically come out and said, yeah, we kind of messed this one up a bit, right? So look, you're trying to judge the system before it comes out. They're coming off of the Wii U, so they played it a bit more safe with the Switch than they did coming from the Wii to the Wii U. And now they know, and most likely, I figure, they will be a bit quicker to act with whatever Nintendo has up their sleeve. And in fact, this is something else that came up, as Bobby Kotick did talk about some conversations that were had with Nintendo and what they have planned for their next generation device. And while this discussion was going on, a lot of headlines started to pop up, which, like this one, for example, was from My Nintendo News, says Activision Blizzard CEO apparently says next Nintendo system close to PlayStation 4 and Xbox One power-wise. And this wasn't the only headline that came up. Many others did. I believe even Nintendo Everything had one, and then they pulled it because as really we were figuring out the sourcing and the exact quote, became obvious that it wasn't an absolute statement by Bobby Kotick, because we can see the quotation here where he says, "Given closer alignment of Gen 8 platforms than our previous offerings on PS4 and Xbox One, it's reasonable to assume we can make something compelling for their next generation from Nintendo device, Switch as well. I actually think we will likely make a Call of Duty game for a new Nintendo console. I can't tell you there are specific plans, but I can tell you it's something we'd consider. We would consider it once we had the specs, but we don't have them at present. We missed out on the opportunity for this past generation of Switch, but we'd have to wait until the specifications. We don't have any present plans to do so." So you hear that for Bobby Kotick. They don't know what the specifications are. They're just kind of assuming that the next system from Nintendo will kind of align with the PS4 and the Xbox One, and they were able to put Call of Duty, obviously, on the PS4 and the Xbox One until very recently, clearly. So in their mind, yeah, we can probably make something work on Nintendo's next system, so no absolute statement. Activision Blizzard apparently doesn't even have the specifications or dev kits or anything, which does seem a bit weird, but I mean, he's in court. He can't exactly lie about this. Now, as for the next system from Nintendo being around a PS4 and Xbox One, it's sort of what I would expect at this point. There will be other technologies leveraged. For example, I would assume that most likely the CPU side of things in Nintendo's next device will be more capable than the Jaguar cores in the PS4 and the Xbox One, and it'll probably leverage some of NVIDIA's technologies like DLSS, we again assume, or just more sophisticated upscaling technologies and stuff, methods, than what we saw with like the PS4 and the Xbox One during its lifetime. So still nothing absolute, no guarantees that it will be like a PS4 and Xbox One, but it's kind of where I'm thinking anyway. But no, we didn't get the big absolute statement from Bobby Kotick that that's where it's going to sit in terms of the power scale. He was just kind of assuming, based on what they've seen previously with the Xbox One and the PS4, that they would probably be able to make a version of Call of Duty for the next system with Nintendo. Next up, let's talk about Final Fantasy XVI and some of the initial sales numbers that have now been shared by Square Enix. We can see this posted up over on the Final Fantasy XVI official account, just showing a graphic here with 3 million copies sold. Looking into the press release, it appears to be a combination of shipped retail physical units as well as digital sales, which the digital sales side of things are much easier to track than sold through copies for physical, which you have to kind of wait and see how orders continue to progress to get a gauge on how many have sold through. But Square Enix got their money for the shipped copies, and based on my time in retail, seeing that these companies don't take the games back, they might as well count those as sold on their end. However, if we take that number and then compare it to some of the previous Final Fantasy games, Genki did a good job here with a nice little list, with 16 at 3 million copies in just under a week, Final Fantasy VII Remake at 3.5 copies in 3 days, 15 at 5 million, and RE4 Remake thrown in there for 3 million in 2 days. You can kind of get an idea that, hey, Final Fantasy 16 at 3 million copies in 6 days is actually pretty good, considering the install size, which I think is the context that's very necessary here for some of this analysis. The PS5, our last reported number, 38.4 million, probably closer to 40 million, maybe even above that right now. But still, 3 million copies shipped or sold for Final Fantasy 16, I believe puts it as the fastest selling PlayStation 5 exclusive release so far. So I would categorize this as a good release, a good sales result for Final Fantasy 16, mostly because we already kind of prepped for this kind of a number, as Yoshi P had been talking about their expectations for sales, in that it will continue to sell for the long haul, not necessarily something they're looking to get all at once up front, maybe in a few months. This is a game that I think can sell alongside of the PlayStation 5 for years at this point, and it's very possible that it overtakes something like Final Fantasy 15 over the next couple of years, as it is a visual showcase for the PlayStation 5, and I would say it has the chance to appeal to a much wider audience than basically any other Final Fantasy game before this. Yeah, a lot of that playing into the idea of the combat not necessarily being turn-based or menu systems or anything, and more people seeing the big spectacles with these icon battles, and even playing off of like things like a Game of Thrones-esque story and stuff. But it's definitely a really cool game to pair next to the PlayStation 5, and it's one that I'm sure many people will look to pick up as we go along. Now, they didn't give us any regional data, as in like how many did it sell in Japan versus the US or Europe, but we will have the Japanese sales charts come out today, and we can get a look at how it did for the retail side of things, and maybe even give us an idea as to how much it's skewed digitally overall. But to me, looking at this, pretty good start for Final Fantasy 16, and we'll see how it continues to sell in the coming months and even years. Next up, let's talk about PlayStation Plus Essential, as we did have the July games revealed, which we can see a nice little card that Sony posted over on PlayStation Blog. And these July games will be available starting July 4th. So this is your reminder, go ahead and claim the games from June. Just go ahead and at least add them to your library. You might as well, you pay for the subscription. But let's see, starting with Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War. This is the cross-gen bundle, but really it's just for the PS5 or the PS4. Then we have Alan Wake Remastered for the PS5 and the PS4. And then Endling, Extinction is Forever, PS5 and PS4. Looking up and down here at the list, I I feel like this is pretty good. I know Call of Duty, not everyone's like probably thrilled to see that in there, but I thought Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War was a pretty good campaign to run through if you're just someone who doesn't want to play the multiplayer. I still think it's worth a look there, especially if you picked up your PS5 recently and want to jump into a shooter. But Alan Wake Remastered, that's a really cool game to have added in here, especially because we know Alan Wake 2 is coming up in the next, like 2.5 months or so. This way people can go ahead and jump into the Alan Wake universe and get acclimated to it ahead of that release. And I haven't really played Endling at all, so let me know down in the comments if the Endling Extinction is Forever. It's one that I should be checking out, but of course, make sure you claim these when it shows up in July. I feel like there are a lot of people who just completely forget. Is a couple of button presses, add it to your library, take advantage of that PlayStation Plus Essentials subscription if you are paying for it, and we should find out some information as to the extras and premium tiers. And here I am, once again, crossing my fingers, hoping for something interesting on that PlayStation 2 front. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about Nintendo Switch Online and some new games that are heading into the service right now. And this is for the Sega Genesis, which the Sega Genesis library has quietly become very, very impressive in that expansion pack tier. And yeah, I know it's for the $50 per year subscription service alongside of the Nintendo 64 library, but the Genesis, high quality stuff in there, and that continues, which you can see posted up over on Nintendo's Twitter account, showing Ghouls and Ghosts, Crusader of Senti, Landstalker, The Revenge of Shinobi. So I'm familiar with Ghouls and Ghosts and The Revenge of Shinobi. I remember a friend had Landstalker when I was little playing the Genesis, and I just didn't really get into it. Not at all familiar with Crusader of Senti, but definitely Ghouls and Ghosts and The Revenge of Shinobi. Those are high quality titles there for the Sega Genesis library. And once again, it's impressive stuff. I know people look to the N64, those titles as being the big splashy ones, along now with the Game Boy Advance, but don't sleep on the Sega Genesis collection that they've made available here. I might check out Landstalker again, just because it's one of those games where, you're younger and you don't necessarily understand everything that's going on, but it's part of that NSO lineup, which I have, and kind of jump in and check it out now. But let me know which one of these four you'd be jumping into immediately. Is it Revenge of the Shinobi? That's probably the one I would be checking out right away. Is it Ghouls and Ghosts? Maybe Landstalker? Or who knows, maybe it's Crusader of Senti, and I've just completely disrespected it this entire segment. And before we go to the comment of the day, we're gonna take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, how do you feel about the combat in Final Fantasy XVI? Okay, 51% said it's okay, I'm good with action or turn-based for Final Fantasy. 31% say it's great, I like it more than turn-based. Oh, only 18% feel strong enough to say I don't like it, bring back turn-based. This is something that I'm getting more and more of a feeling for. Maybe some of it's just old. I don't know. The turn-based stuff doesn't necessarily define Final Fantasy anymore. And again, I think that's just the younger generation, the newer generation coming in, and maybe not necessarily remembering or growing up with those PS1, even Super Nintendo titles where it was like purely turn-based. That's just a thing of the past, I guess. Although a lot of people look back on Final Fantasy X very fondly, and I mean that was an all-party turn-based setup. But I don't know, maybe Final Fantasy just kind of evolved past those times, and it is purely action-based now. I know it's a long ways off, but I think Final Fantasy XVII and how that shows up is basically going to determine what the true future of Final Fantasy is, especially with the direction when it comes to the combat. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from the Gaming Lakitu, says, the fact that the Project Q could be $300 and you can only play games with the internet just makes you wonder what the point is, especially with the Switch on the market. So I think what's happening online right now is Sony is viewing this one way, and then most of the audience online is viewing this another. I honestly believe Sony is viewing this almost as a controller, like an accessory, whereas many people online are seeing the Project Q as another system. And that's just not the case. I think Sony's saying, hey, leave this on your coffee table if somebody's watching the TV, but you want to play your PlayStation 5 because you want to play Final Fantasy 16. You pick it up and you can play right there. Yes, it has a 3 to 4 hour battery life, but it's not really leaving your house, so you can just consistently plug it in. So I think that's the biggest part here, expectations and those clashing. But yeah, I think it's showing up with a $250 price tag, and that's going to be a lot of sticker shock and an interesting day online when it happens. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. Where's Nintendo's next generation system and where it's going to rank, I guess, power-wise? Will it be a PS4 and Xbox One? Will it be more or even less than that? Let me know. But also, what about Final Fantasy 16 now shipping, we'll say? 3 million copies. Were you expecting more than that? And then, of course, Nintendo Switch Online and PlayStation Plus offerings for July. Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.